huge matchup between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Tennessee Vols this weekend. Number 12 Georgia hosting number 7 Tennessee in the college football playoff rankings. I'm doing a deep dive on Tennessee here. I'm going to tell you a lot about the numbers. I'm going to tell you a lot about what I've seen. What are Georgia's chances? What do I really think about this game? This is all your deep dive right here that you need to know about Tennessee between Nico Iamaleava, Dylan Sampson, the defense, the backup quarterback, right? Nico is in concussion protocol. Everything you need to know about Georgia's matchup with Tennessee is right here. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. Okay, let's start with Nico himself, right? To me, one of the biggest talents in college football is Nico Iamaleava. I think I got it that time. He can run. He can really sling it. He can make all sorts of throws. And I think there's been a little bit of a misconception with him this season, right? He's not in the Heisman conversation or anything like that, but this team is not about Nico. This Tennessee team's success is not about Nico either, right? And you look at his stats, you look at his numbers, you actually watch the games. What does Tennessee like to do? Tennessee likes to run the football. They have the most productive, I don't know if you want to call it best, but they have the most productive rushing attack in the conference. Dylan Sampson over 1,100 yards. It's not close. He's the leading rusher. He also has 20 rushing touchdowns. So getting the ball into number 6, getting the ball into Dylan Sampson's hands is really priority numero uno for this Tennessee football team. And look, I mean, I've got rushing numbers pulled out. I guess we'll go ahead and get into that. They ran really well. Tennessee's worst rushing game this season has come against the Florida Gators. That was a tight game in overtime. They only ran for 3.3 yards per carry, 143 yards, 3 touchdowns. But look, they've ran the ball really well in a lot of these games. Now, some of that's inflated the first 3 games of the season, and that kind of goes with a little bit of a theme for this Tennessee team that I'll get to in just a second. But listen to their rushing stats throughout the year. Tennessee, Chattanooga to open up the season, they blow them out. 304 yards and 5 touchdowns on 46 carries. NC State the following week, 249 yards and 3 touchdowns on 44 carries. Kent State the following week, 456 yards and 6 touchdowns. They ran the ball extremely well against those cupcake teams. Okay, what happens when they get into SEC play? Oklahoma, 151 yards and a touchdown on 52 carries. That's only 2.9 yards per carry. There is a noticeable dip in the production once you go to the SEC. Now, it's still pretty good production. All right. At Arkansas, right? This is a game that they lost. This is a game that they lost 19-14 up there in Fayetteville. 174 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground on 36 carries. That was an improvement from the previous week against Oklahoma. But look, it's good enough to win, and they didn't win. Why didn't they win in that game? Why didn't they win that game? Not a good passing game from Nico Iamaleava. I'm just going to call him Nico. I'm trying, guys. 17 for 29, 158 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, 58.6% completion percentage. They had a long of 42 yards through the air, but they weren't effective enough through the air, weren't effective enough through the ground. Just one of the worst offensive performances for Tennessee this year came on the road. Now, this will only be Tennessee's 3rd time on the road. Only their 3rd time on the road. Oklahoma and Arkansas were the 2 instances before that. We saw a 25-10 win. I believe that was the final score again, 25-15 against Oklahoma, right? Tennessee's offense kind of vanilla, kind of didn't do a lot. Josh Heupel claims, you saw it on the sideline, at least with the lip reading, that they were kind of dialing it back with the play calling against his alma mater. I don't know how much I'm going to read into that. I'm not going to read a lot into that. And then you get to Florida versus Florida at home. They win in overtime. So a stretch of 3 games where they blew out bad teams. They blew out Kent State. NC State's not a good team. They blew them out. They blew out UT Chattanooga. And then they got into SEC play. It got tough for Tennessee. They had to gut it out a little bit. It was a very, very, very good defensive performance against Oklahoma. And I will get to some defensive numbers here in a second because that's the other side of the story for the Vols. And probably the more concerning part for Georgia in this game will be more about Tennessee's defense. I want to get through the offense a little bit first. Not good against Florida. Nico, 16 for 26, 169 yards, no touchdowns and a pick. How did they run against the Gators? Good enough. 3 touchdowns, 143 yards on 43 carries. Not their most effective running game. They were 3.3 yards on the ground, but they had to gut it out. Against Alabama, Nico, again, didn't have a great game. He got dinged up in that game, too. He came out, and that's when the backup quarterback came in and threw an interception on his only attempt in the game. Made things harder. But Alabama, they gut one out against Alabama. He throws for almost 200 yards, but only 51.9% completion percentage, a touchdown and a pick. So far, look, the numbers for Nico are not impressive in SEC play. They were very impressive. They were very good when they were playing cupcake teams at the beginning of the year. But once they got into the SEC slate, it's not been good. Same for Carson Beck. Kentucky, 28-18. They danced around with them a little bit. Nico has a better game, right? 28 for 30, 290 yards, a touchdown. How did they run against Kentucky? Solid. 4.2 yards per carry, almost 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then you get last week against Mississippi State. It's just not a close game. Nico throws a little bit more than he usually does. The backup quarterback comes in, though, for the second half. Why? Because Nico gets hurt, and he's in concussion protocol this week. But 8 for 13, 174 yards, and 2 touchdowns before he went out. Well, what did the backup quarterback do? He came in 5 for 8, 38 yards, right? They start to lean on Dylan Sampson when he goes out. They ran 57 times. It is the most that they have run all season, but they run a lot. If they can choose to do that, they're going to run a lot. That's what this Tennessee team is about on the offensive side of the ball. That's what Georgia will have to stop. It will have to stop the run, whether Nico's out there or the Gaston Moore, right? That's their backup quarterback. That's Tennessee's first priority. Now, they've got good receivers, and they've got talent at quarterback. Regardless, they got talent at quarterback, but if Nico's out there, it's a little bit of a different story. You flip it around to the other side of the football. That's where more of my concerns lie for Georgia, because I think that Georgia can stop the run. I think Georgia can affect Nico, especially at home at night in a hostile environment where, look, the Dogs have their backs against the wall. But when you flip it over to the defensive side of the football, that, like I said a second ago, that's where Tennessee's really good. Now, on the road, they allowed 19 points in a loss, and they allowed 15 points in a win. So they've been limiting teams. Now, Arkansas and Oklahoma, first of all, Oklahoma's probably the worst or second worst. They're bottom 3 in the SEC in offense. I don't even have to look up that number to know that. I just have watched enough. That's just the case. They're not good on offense. Now, Tennessee on defense, 5th in both scoring and total defense. They are number 5 in the country behind teams like Army, who's not really playing good teams. Ohio State, Notre Dame, those are kind of the other teams that are up there with them. Indiana is up there, but Tennessee only allowing 12.56 points per game, only allowing 271.6 total yards per game. Well, what's the case for Georgia? They went to Texas, didn't put up a lot of total yards, still won that football game. Obviously, they didn't put up a ton of total yards at Ole Miss last week. They lost that football game against Alabama, more of an anomaly type of football game. That was a crazy football game. I don't know how you evaluate that one, to be honest. So that's why I kind of don't talk about it that much anymore, because I think it's hard to really have takeaways from that contest. If Tennessee limits Georgia's offense, it will have a much better chance to win, and that's not a secret. Now, is this one of those things where Georgia just needs to get to 20 points, 25 points, 30 points to win? We're not seeing Georgia's offense explode very much. 10 points last week. 34 points the week before in Jacksonville. 2 of those touchdowns coming very, very fast at the end of the game. They struggled for a long time. Obviously, the 30 points against Texas before that. They put up 40-plus against Mississippi State. They put up about 30 against Auburn. But at home here against a good defense, can Georgia get to like 24, 30 points? I don't know. Georgia's offense hasn't been good. The offensive line looked not great last week. The receivers are still dropping balls, and the Dogs can't run the ball. And look, that's going to be a problem in Athens too if Georgia doesn't run the football. Tennessee's got a good front. They've got talent on that line. It's a better defense than what we're used to seeing the Vols have the last few years. So I think Georgia needs to watch out for that. That's going to be the biggest part. Can Georgia score? That's the biggest issue. I have faith in Georgia's defense to put up a pretty good performance against Tennessee here. I don't think it's crazy. that they limit Tennessee to 20 or fewer points. What we've seen is Tennessee can be an explosive offense, but against better talent, it really hasn't been that. And that's kind of my evaluation here today. A little bit of a deep dive on the Tennessee Vols. I think Georgia wins this game. I'll be back tomorrow with more information. Thanks for watching.